welcome. It's the 3rd of July, 2015, and this is episode 3 of the Unseen Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Carr, and if you're watching this on the Hangout on Air, you might notice that there are no panelists due to various circumstances. If you are watching a member of the panelist community and you want to come in to the Hangout, just go to the community. There's a link there, and you can pop right in and join the discussion. I think it's going to be a pretty spacey one, lots of space exploration. Although Chris McGinlay is going to come by, he wants to talk about a group of people called the Elders, and if Chris makes an appearance, we will let him bring up that topic as well. So right now, let me just make a few preliminary remarks, and then we'll jump right into it. Now, this is the unscripted, unedited, uncensored, Creative Commons spin-off of the Wow Signal. To learn more about the Wow Signal, go to wowsignalpodcast.com. To learn more about this podcast, the Unseen Podcast, go to unseenpodcast.com. As I mentioned, this is our 13th episode. I've set this at a recording time that was intended to be friendly to our European participants, and a couple of them did agree to appear, but they've had various circumstances. I am expecting one very soon. Now, let me tell you a couple of the things that have surfaced this week, or more recently, or have been building for a while. As you all have probably heard by now, New Horizons is only about 2 weeks out from Pluto, so that's very exciting. It's starting to get some really good images of Pluto and its largest moon, Charon, and there are surprises. And I'm not an expert on Pluto or how it could get those kinds of marks on its surface. I'm just going to urge you to stay tuned. You can follow that mission on Twitter. Alan Stern, the PI for New Horizons, posts copiously on both Twitter and Facebook. So they're using social media extensively. You can easily track what's going on, and they're releasing their images almost as soon as possible. Hello, Adam.
Hi. Hello, Paul.
Well, it's good to see you. Hope you're feeling.
Good to see you. Finally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, since this is your first time on, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, Adam Synergy is a fairly obvious pseudonym for Adam Smith. There are several hundred Adam Smiths already on Google, so I just use a silly name to distinguish myself from all the other Adam Smiths. It's one of the unfortunate consequences of having a very common name.
Mm-hmm.
I work as a production manager in a food factory in a town called Grimsby in England. We process, freeze, and distribute frozen vegetables. Peas, carrots, cauliflower, cabbage, you name it. We freeze it and we sell it to the world. But,
all good for you. All right. And now you seem to have a lot of interest in space-related topics.
Yes,
So,
yes, definitely.
So we'll be into that. I was just starting in to talk about the new images of Pluto that have been coming back.
Yeah, they're awesome, aren't they?
Yeah, now
Absolutely awesome.
people have to understand that Pluto's about 8 light hours away from us. So those images take a long time to get back, but they are posting them almost as fast as they get them.
Yeah, and you have to give the New Horizons team a lot of credit for doing that. They try and be as open and honest as they possibly can. They get the images out as quickly as they can. And there are still crazy people who insist that they're not real.
Yeah. Well, we did an episode about, I think it was episode 10 about space conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
So I think pretty much all those conspiracy theories come from people who've never been around NASA before, don't know anybody at NASA.
I've chatted to a few of them online, just out of interest. I've tried to get through to them. I've tried to understand their arguments. Some of the Americans, I think it's because NASA is a government agency. They're very much against the American government, which is fair enough in a way. Governments do lie to the citizens. The British government doesn't tell the truth. The American government doesn't always tell the truth. It's fair enough. I can understand it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a big jump from knowing that your government is not that honest with you, especially on matters of war and economy.
It's a completely different thing, isn't it?
But when we're talking about science, it's a very different matter. And I know a lot of NASA scientists, and I know that they're not the kind of people who are tight-lipped or obedient.
No. Why would somebody who's dedicated their entire life to science lie? It doesn't make sense, does it? Thousands of them. There would have to be a global conspiracy. Many thousands.
The latest images from Pluto show not on the closest approach side, but on the opposite side, some really interesting sort of marks. Look almost like finger marks. A giant put his fingers there. When we get closer, we'll get a better view of that. But that's really an interesting feature. It who knows what it is, but it doesn't appear to be an impact feature. Something else.
I wouldn't like to speculate at the moment.
Yeah,
give us another week.
Well, I also will exercise my right to be not an expert and and admit that I have no idea what it is.
No,
it's not.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, and it's but it certainly looks like Pluto's got a lot of complicated surface features, and
it does look very interesting.
And in about 2 weeks we'll start getting. I know these guys. I actually worked on the New Horizons program briefly many years ago. Yeah.
Wow.
The way they've got it structured is that they will store the most interesting and important close approach images in a particular place on the recorder. And then they'll play those back first. So even though there's a ton of science data on the recorder, they will play back they can put a pointer where they start the most important stuff, and then the closest approach stuff, and they will play that back first. It'll be a lot of images. There'll also be some spectra, things like that. Particle counts, that sort of thing. But the images take up a lot of the bandwidth. So, and it is not, they are not getting a lot of bits per second back from Pluto.
Well, they've only got a limited amount of time as well, because the speed that this spacecraft is traveling at is going to be a very quick flyby, isn't it?
It'll take about, I think, as I recall correctly, 2 or 3 months to get all the data back. But they'll have the highest priority data back first, probably within a week or so. And then they'll, and then we should now, right during the closest approach, it's not going to be like we have live video. We won't be seeing anything. What they're doing is they're going to be having they're going to be doing what they call radio science. Oh, there's Mike Bohler.
All right.
Hi, Mike.
It'll take about, I think, as I recall correctly, 2 or 3 months to get all the data back.
Mike, if you could put your headphones on, I'm getting a lot of echo from you.
Yeah, I'm going to get my headphones right now. And then we should right during the closest approach, it's not going to be like we have live video. It will.
I'm hearing myself from about 1 minute ago.
30 seconds.
What they call radio science. Where's Mike Bohler?
I'm going to suppress his microphone. Hold on. There we go. Okay. What I was going to say is that right during closest approach, we're doing what's called. Oh, there's Nick Nielsen. Hello, Nick.
Hi,
Mike. I've muted your mic until you get your headphones on.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hi.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us, Nick. Short notice. Nick's been on a lot of other episodes, so I don't think we need to introduce him again. But so is Mike. I've been on two or three before. We were talking about New Horizons Closest Approach, which is coming up very soon. And basically, we're not going to be seeing a whole lot of images immediately during the Closest Approach. It'll take a while to play them all back. Plus 8 hours to get all the data across that distance. So what they will be doing is they will be pointing their antenna at Earth, because they want to transmit through the atmosphere of Pluto and try to get radio science on the atmosphere. They'll also want to get exquisite measurements of Pluto's mass that way, which they can do by looking at how the Doppler shift increases and decreases as it goes in and towards. That's extremely sensitive to the mass of the central body, and they can just write a Closest Approach, and they'll get a very good mass measurement. They might even be able to get some rough estimates of other mass properties. So,
is it Bohler? What's the name of the chemical that makes it red? The surface of Pluto.
Which chemical is that?
I'm struggling to remember the name of it. It's nothing like Mars. Mars is rusty, but Pluto's red appearance is down to its atmosphere. I think it's methane, basically, and ammonia in its atmosphere, breaking down into, I think it's Solin. I'd have to have a look.
Okay, we can look that up. If anybody knows, pipe up. But yeah, it's so. I guess the only message is, stay tuned. Mike, are you ready? I'll unmute you. Hey.
Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear. Oh, wait a minute. Did I mute you again? Okay. I'm struggling with this control here. Okay, now say something.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you're on the air.
Yeah, I saw you being kind of lonely there, so I wanted to join in.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, now I don't know if you guys probably haven't met Adam, who goes by the name of Adam Synergy online. This is Adam's first time on.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Welcome.
I'm glad we got somebody from Europe, because I put it at a time that was intended to be Europe friendly. The last time we had somebody on from the UK, it was 2:00 in the morning there, and he was pretty sleepy through most of the.
Yeah. I must confess, I've not been very well recently. I've been coughing a lot, so
that's all right.
I'll do my best not to destroy your recording by having a coughing fit.
Coughing is better than my usual ranting and going off on tangents. So
okay.
It's content over form here.
That's what makes it interesting.
Yes. This is meant to be kind of a casual, stretched out conversation. We don't script it. We do talk about what we're going to talk about in advance. We have a 3-week period where people can suggest topics and even special guests. And by the way, I want to plug right now, we do have a special guest coming up in 3 episodes. His name is Brian Koberlein. He is an astrophysicist and a science communicator who's starting to get a lot of attention for his
Brian is one of my heroes.
Yeah. Brian writes very clear, very understandable articles about physics and astrophysics topics. And so if you have questions for Brian Koberlein for episode 16, that'll be, 20, that's 3 weeks from today. So it'll be the 24th, I believe. If you have questions for Brian Koberlein, you can get them to me by sending them to unseenpodcast@gmail.com, or you can go on to our subreddit and I'll have a link to that in the show notes. And there's also a link to it at unseenpodcast.com. Or you can just comment on this episode and at the blog, and we will be happy to try to get your question to Brian. And I know Nick's already given me a long list of sophisticated questions. So there's, we're looking forward to that. We don't have a special guest every episode. He's kindly agreed to appear on our podcast. We had Ben Tippett on episode 1, and Ben did a great job telling us more about relativity and cosmology, so on. And so I really, I think we can go much further. There's a lot of interesting new developments in astrophysics in the last few months that we want to ask him about. And one thing that I'm very curious about is this void that's been published. That's about 250 megaparsecs wide out. It seems to sort of beat up the homogeneity assumption pretty well. And I'm going to ask him about that. And also the latest what the latest news is on gravity waves as well. We may actually have a gravity wave detection soon. So LIGO is up and running now, I understand. So
yeah.
And they've fixed all their major problems, and they are trying to get some observations. So I don't think they'll publish anything until they've been over it very, very carefully. But they're not going to have a press conference the next day if they detect something. Maybe the next month if we're lucky. But because the data is so noisy that it takes a lot of careful thought to fish the signal out of it. Let's see what else is happening. Well, Dawn is still getting closer to Ceres.
Doing an excellent job.
Yes. Chris McGinlay will join us shortly. It's, of course, we're getting the usual mystery mongering. The word mysterious has to be attached to everything having to do with Ceres now.
Yeah.
They should just all wear T-shirts that say it's mysterious.
Well, that's why I'm trying to follow the Pluto, because there's some neat stuff coming. I mean, I was listening a little bit before coming on and talking about stuff that's happening with New Horizons and the Pluto, and I think it's cool how the Pluto's and its moon Charon is how it's locked, and it's like it's going in this weird orbit. I'm just wondering when the crazies are going to say those all artificial.
I think they're probably already saying it.
Yeah. It hasn't been too much noise yet, but I mean there's a guy actually from I like listening to Stuart Robbins and his exposing pseudo-astronomy. And he talked about photo manipulations.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's I think from the last show I mentioned the lunar ziggurat, which was where somebody zoomed in onto using paint or Photoshop, zoomed in and found what looked like a Babylonian ziggurat on the moon. And Stuart, he explained really perfectly how when you zoom in on a photo that come like from NASA or whatever space agency, just zooming in it is not going to. It's not like in the movies where you can zoom in. You're looking at and you zoom in and then you can start reading license plates and the people talking. It doesn't work that way. I mean, a pixel. I'd actually say listen to his show, some of his earliest shows, because he gets really into how the sensors capture the light, how it's counting photons and all this stuff. So by using the algorithms in a paint shop or something like that, you can accidentally introduce false information because of the photo is being it's basically the program taking a guess what that pixel, when you take a pixel and you try to break it up,
Yeah.
it's trying to guess how to reconstruct that pixel.
Did you see the news story about the visual AI that was used its pattern recognition system was fed into itself in a feedback loop, and it created these fantastic images. You can see them online. So it was, straining to find patterns in the sky and of these pictures, and it was pretty bizarre. It looked like an LSD vision or something. Some of these pictures came out as.
I haven't seen it.
I've not seen
Kind of
that.
cool looking.
No.
Well, of course, anytime you feed something back into itself, there's a potential for all kinds of instabilities, right?
Well, that's what the internet gives us with the conspiracy theorists. It's a continuous feedback loop.
Right.
And they talk to each other and they magnify each other, and that's how you get this stuff.
Plus,
Also, I've noticed.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've also noticed over the past few weeks or month, somebody has been taking photographs of Mars and greatly blowing them up or whatever, and identifying bizarre surface features, and one of them was labeled as a car on Mars, another one was labeled as something else on Mars. I mean, just everything you can possibly imagine being found in rock shapes from pictures of the surface of Mars.
Well, there is a car on Mars. It's the
Yes,
car
that's right.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
So I forgot to mention on the last show, because I've got some printouts here from there's a guy who actually believes that there's a secret American program that had been sending people to Mars. There's actually some type of a teleportation system, and Barack Obama was one of the early travelers, and I'm like, okay, and and then they
from the future or from the past?
From the past, when he was
well, I hear that when he was younger, he was quite a traveler, but
yeah, yep. I don't know it,
but he didn't have to go anywhere.
No, but yeah, it's so where how do they? I wish I had these guys' imaginations. I mean, I really wish I could be that imaginative and come up with this crazy stuff.
But once you get used to the conspiracy theorists, you can easily predict, just like people are predicting with Pluto and Ceres, all the kind of weird stuff that is going to emerge. And you can start getting a feel for it, and you can, one of my siblings that I'm no longer in communication with is a conspiracy theorist, and after I started hearing all this stuff, I was able to start guessing, what the kind of stuff that people would come up with. It's not. It's actually pretty predictable, even if it is imaginative.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder where that comes from, but I mean, but I think I can kind of. I'm a little bit upset with not only the media, but with the PR people at some of these academic institutions who like to throw the word mysterious in every chance they get. Like the mysterious pyramid on Mars. Well, I don't think it's all that mysterious. It's just a rock that looks like a pyramid, but it's mysterious. but it's clickbait. If you say mysterious, people are going to click on it. And
it's clickbait, and universities have become industries, and they're like everybody else. They're in competition in the media market to get eyes and to get dollars and to get clicks. And they say some things that are really unfortunate.
Yes, and I know that when you you read a press release from an academic or scientific institution, you're not reading something written by a scientist. You're probably reading something that was reviewed by a scientist under a lot of time pressure, but it was written by a PR person. to sound like a news story, and they're hoping that the news wires will just pick up the release pretty much verbatim, which they often do. They will just
Clickbait.
Yeah, well, if you put it in words like mysterious or baffled, the boffins are baffled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rock on Mars baffles boffins. That's a good. You see that?
Yes, if you can make it alliterative, all the better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And scientists puzzled. Well, that just means they haven't. Yeah, they haven't gone through the whole process yet. That doesn't really mean they're.
No.
Yeah,
Well, that's what science is all about.
Yes, hopefully we'll always remain puzzled.
Yeah.
But people like that because the scientists don't know what it is. See, they're not so smart. Well, they'll be the first to know what it is, if anybody does. But
as you said in a previous podcast, the better your arguments, the more you're a shill for the man.
Well,
that goes without saying.
Where are these high-paying shill gigs? Because I want one.
I want one too.
I could be a great shill.
How do you get those 50,000 pop speaking gigs when you go in front of a crowd of thousands of people and tell them complete garbage? I'd like to get in on that too.
Yeah, but shill seems so much easier. You just sit in front of your computer and you don't have to travel.
Yeah.
I guess I could be a tech shill, but that's not as interesting. Being a shill for the secret world government, but
you haven't been approached by them.
No, well,
you haven't been invited to Bilderberg or Davos. Me neither.
Yeah, well, I if the money's right, we can talk. No, folks, I don't really think there are. I mean, there are shills online, sure, that shills for Microsoft and shills for tobacco and shills for climate change denial and all that. But there are, I don't think there are shills for strange things on Mars. I really don't.
Well, you have to believe that if you're a conspiracy theorist, that there's this vast unseen bureaucracy that's being controlled, whether it's by reptilians or whether it's by 33rd degree Masons or whether it's by something else, that they're not letting the truth come out. But the truth is out there, as we know from the X-Files.
Yeah.
And if you'll be sufficiently heroic in digging into UFO abduction stories, eventually you'll figure it out for yourself, and then you'll be superior to everybody else because you can look down on the people who don't believe in reptilians running the world as useful idiots, shills, as it were.
Sheeple.
People, indeed.
Wake up, sheeple. Yeah. So anyway, those are the two big things that are happening right now are Dawn and New Horizons. Every day, almost seems like almost every day we get a better picture of New Horizons, and it's the features are interesting, but I think we've agreed already we don't have any idea what they are, and we're just gonna sit tight.
It is Choline, CHOLIN, that's believed to be the substance making Pluto red. It's formed by the breaking down methane and ammonia. That's the current theory, best theory we have for why Pluto is red. But we'll have much better idea once we get decent spectra.
Yeah, they have.
Interesting to see if that's right.
They'll get very good spectra and also radio science on the atmosphere. So they'll should be. A couple of the biggest marquee instruments on the pictures that you've been seeing have been taken by a camera called Laurie, which is the long range reconnaissance imager.
Awesome.
Laurie was developed here in Maryland at the Applied Physics Lab, which is also where the spacecraft was built. I believe that Southwest Research did the Ralph and what they call Ralph and Alice, which are the spectrometers. And they are, they'll get, that's really where the heavy duty science will come from, is the spectrometers. You'll get a lot of pictures, but, and the pictures will be interesting, but I think, it's not just what the shapes of things are, but what they're made of. That's more important. But I'm looking forward to that, and everybody should stay tuned and be patient, because the data will not come back all at once. So in fact, during the closest approach, there won't be any data coming back. They'll wait until they're done with the closest approach, then they'll fire up the transmitter with and start modulating again. And they will, it will take weeks to get it all back. And then they're going to go on and find another Kuiper Belt object to fly by.
It will probably take another 5 years.
Several years, yes, I think so.
Maybe.
I'm not sure they picked one yet, but
no, I don't think they have.
But they have a few candidates.
But they're not willing to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'm pretty sure they have a good idea.
Yeah, but
they're not willing to confirm it yet.
Well, I think that they're too busy with their main target right now. They'll think about it when they have a moment to breathe. It is not a very big team. It's compared to some of these other international science teams that are huge. This is, it's not just 3 or 4 people, but it's not a gigantic science team, and it's not a gigantic mission team. So they have they'll think about it, and it looks like the nuclear battery, what they call the RTG that powers it, will last for quite a while longer. So they're usually pretty conservatively designed, so they'll be able to keep it warm in there and keep the fuel lines from freezing. That's kind of the the governing limitation. And when they can, and for quite a while, and they'll be able to get another Kuiper Belt object in. That should be fun. And then of course, Ceres, Dawn is getting closer and closer to Ceres, and the most recent thing they've seen is this mountain. It doesn't seem like it has any context to it. It just
the pyramid.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. The mysterious mountain. I forgot to say mysterious. Now that is a really interesting thing. There doesn't seem to be anything like it anywhere else on the body.
No.
It's about 3 miles high. So it's pretty big. And it's about the size of one of the larger Rocky Mountains. And it's fairly symmetrical, and nobody knows where it came from. So it certainly, must have been put there by the reptilians or some,
Insert favorite conspiracy person.
Yeah. Well, but it's very interesting. It doesn't make any sense being there. Phil Plait wrote something like, "What?" He said, "What series are you serious? This can't be right." But yeah, it's pretty cool. It looks like a volcano is what it looks like, but why would there only be one volcano? And why would there would be any volcanoes? And, we don't know. So,
cryovolcano, maybe.
That's one possibility. It could be very, very ancient. What's left over from a big pile of ice and rock coming out. But again, I plead ignorance. I don't really know what it is. My favorite thing it to be is mine tailings, but I can't find any evidence around it of anything that looks like it's been scooped up and placed there. So
it's very surprising that there's only one of them.
Yeah, that is surprising.
Maybe it's the ant people.
Yeah. Well,
that could be whole new. That'd be a whole new thing. I don't think I've heard of ant aliens. I've heard of the reptilians, the Greys, the Greys, the
Nordics.
The buggers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them, actually. I think one guy claimed there were 27 species. Another one claimed there were more.
There's actually an old episode of The Outer Limits where there are ant aliens. I believe the episode is called the Zantee Misfits.
Wow. Now there's a deep piece of trivia.
And you know what? That could very well be the basis. I think was it the Barney? There was the one kind of famous abduction. Not
Betty and Barney Hill.
Betty and Barney Hill. Yeah.
Right.
There were links to their story to a Twilight Zone episode. I don't remember offhand. I know there was that story, and their story almost meshes well with what was in the in that particular episode. So it was like, okay, so I have to dig that out and see what happens when they start talking about the ant aliens on series and how close it matches up to that show.
Yeah, well, I think it was Susan Clancy who in her book, she found some old science fiction movies that matched up pretty well to the stereotypical Greys.
Yeah.
We don't really know where the Grey mythology comes from, but now that it's out there, that's what everybody sees.
Yeah.
Star Trek. I blame Star Trek.
Could be. I used to love that guy with the huge head in Star Trek. I think it was one of the very first episodes. I think it was the first episode, actually. The pilot.
Because I want to say, I remember, I don't know if there's any real study on it, but I know there's been I vaguely remember hearing about when a certain, there might be like a series of movies, B-movie alien thing, and then within a year, people are seeing these exact same, what they saw in the movies. And there's like almost that correlation with, the what's happening in the media, then it kind of filters into the UFO world. And because I can remember things like I think some of the there was a bunch of really popular. I mean, it was in the 50s, the Cold War, alien things, and then all of a sudden people started seeing these aliens. I know there's apparently someone did a study or did an analysis of UFO sightings over Area 51 and the number of U-2 flights almost correlating. So there's all this, a lot of what people are thinking and remembering, and then all of a sudden they have a strange experience and then relates it to maybe their confused memories. How malleable our memories are anyhow.
Oh, yeah.
So they're linking what they may have saw as a kid in a movie theater 10 years earlier to what they were experiencing at that moment. So I see no. That's why I'm thinking. Kind of keep it. I'm trying to keep an ear out for because with all these new discoveries, I mean,
right.
There's going to be somebody who's going to say something about the pyramid on Ceres, or they're going to notice things that they're going to, as we get close to Pluto, they're going to see strange things, and they're going to see this is this, and this is what we've been talking about all this time. So I'm trying to,
Well, I think you've learned that there's an infinite supply of confirmation bias out there, and conjecture is cheap and easy.
Right.
So we're going to get a lot of that, and and we all end up in forums where somebody puts in a very really, really long post in all caps explaining how this validates his theory of hyperdimensional physics and
Yeah.
and they brought to him by an angel while he slept, and it's just at some point you kind of learn how to filter that out. But I mean, the real science takes longer and is often less Hollywood.
Yeah.
But over time, we get it sort of dawns on us. Wow, this is really what we have learned over time is really amazing and cool, and the universe is a strange place. It really is a strange place, and
Very strange.
I've had lots of these little epiphanies where I realize, gosh, if you had told you've told this story about black holes to a well-informed person in the 19th century, they would have just, what?
Yeah. To be burned at the stake and called a heretic.
But the black hole was predicted by Einstein's equations immediately. It took 50 years or so to get reliable observations that confirmed the existence.
The actual first prediction of something like a black hole goes back to the 18th century.
Really?
Yeah. I can't give you a name. I could find a name in a few minutes if you wanted one.
Sure. I know that Schwarzschild's solution to the free space equations came pretty quickly after Einstein published his theory. It's a very clever, elegant solution. And you just look at the solution and you go, what, right? You're dividing by zero. You can't, something's blowing up there. And that was where that was the red flag that said, there's something at this radius that is wrong, or not wrong, but strange. And but that was in the 1920s, and it wasn't until really, I think, the late 70s or early 80s that we had really reliable observations that we could say, yeah, for sure, this is something with a lot of mass that's not putting out any light, and it's real. So that was and other things like that have happened. Like neutrino they needed the neutrino to make the equations balance, and took quite a while, but they eventually discovered the neutrino. Oh, there's Chris McGinlay. Hi, Chris.
Hello there.
Chris, can you hear us?
Hello. Hello, yes, I can hear you. I believe so.
Okay, good.
How are you?
Good. Chris, we've been talking about cool space stuff and weird space ideas, but I thought you had raised that you wanted to discuss this topic of the elders. And I have to admit, yeah. I had never heard of the elders. So can you give us a brief description of what that is?
Yeah, no problem. I read a book by one of Richard Branson's books. It was called Screw Business as Usual, and quite an enjoyable read, actually. And round about somewhere in the middle of the book, he describes the elders, the formation of this group called the elders. There was a meeting with Richard Branson and none other than Peter Gabriel from Genesis. And I don't know why, I can't remember why, but they came up with this idea that it would be good to have an organization of some sort which was promoting the interests of humanity as a whole, as opposed to any individual nation state or any other interest organization. And they eventually, I'm not exactly sure how, but they eventually came up with the idea of retired persons of international repute, such as ex-President Jimmy Carter, and they invited a few a few people together, including Nelson Mandela, and thrashed the idea around, and eventually this organization called the Elders was born from that. It's currently chaired by Kofi Annan, and there's 9 or 10 retired sort of international persons that are involved in it, and their mission is basically to try and promote the welfare interests of humanity as a whole. So that's a kind of a potted history of it. I must admit, I don't know a huge amount about it. I follow their Google Plus page. I've watched them traveling to Israel and Palestine, trying to help in the situation there. Their work seems to be reasonably, well, I would say very appropriate and very, very well intended. If nothing else, some of you guys must have come across their page. They have a pretty good website, actually, which explains about the different elders themselves and how they become appointed and what their backgrounds are. The website definitely worth a look at. Just theelders.org.
I checked it out very briefly. I have had a brief look at their stuff, and it's quite impressive. It's a good idea, but whether they can get enough impetus behind them to have much effect is what worries me. Whether they could have any, significant effect on global affairs. I mean, I'm fairly seriously convinced that we're entering into a global extinction. I'm pretty sure we are, caused by us. And that is the biggest problem facing humanity and every other living thing on the planet. Whether they'll have any bearing on that, it remains to be seen. To be honest, I'm fairly skeptical. But that really is the big thing that needs addressing, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, you certainly could have a point there. There was a news article just recently about the state of ocean acidification on the BBC. They were talking there about the reasonably well-known effects of ocean acidification, pointing out that a significant percentage of atmospheric oxygen is generated from the oceans, and also drawing some parallels with the geologic great epic period of time called the Great Dying. Yeah, it's kind of scary in some ways, in many ways. But I think that if the world is going to, if humans are going to tackle these issues, then it has to be something which is not merely at a national level. And some sort of governance structure will have to emerge that can address these problems in something beyond a 4 or 5 year time horizon, which is what most democratic governments seem to operate around. And hence, an
election
organization
cycles,
like others or something like it. Yeah. Election cycles, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's always been the lately I've been hearing just the last week some what are to me kind of scary calls for electing the Supreme Court, because some people didn't like a certain decision they made last week about letting any two consenting adults who want to get married. They said, well, these are unelected lawyers. Well, yes, let's keep them unelected. I don't want Supreme Court decisions based upon what's going to be popular in the next election. And and that's why they have lifetime appointments, and they don't have to worry about what if the next president doesn't like them and so in a sense, the Supreme Court then is kind of a trusted body. They're considered to be sort of, they have their own points of view and their own agendas, but they have no political agenda. At least they're not overtly. Some of them might have one sort of buried in the back with their heads, but they often do things that even the president who appointed them doesn't want them to do. So
Nixon is supposed to say that appointing Earl Warren was one of the biggest mistakes he ever made.
Yeah, well, the small town in Texas I used to live in had a big billboard that said "Impeach Earl Warren." It was up there for years. He retired peacefully, but anyway. So what I think the elder sounds to me like is this sort of unelected but trustworthy body of people who aren't trying to further their careers anymore because their careers have already peaked.
Yeah.
And have international reputation.
Aung San Suu Kyi was an elder. She was one of the elders, but then when she became active in the Myanmar government, then she stepped down, or she was asked to step down, but she did step down because she then had a vested interest in the goings on for a nation. Yeah,
but without guns or money, there's not much that they can do, unfortunately. And I don't know if the group is well funded or it's unlikely they're well armed. But Machiavelli made a distinction between armed prophets and unarmed prophets, and we all know that unarmed prophets usually fail.
Yes, well,
it depends what their mission is. I mean, one of their aims is to raise awareness of things, which are relevant to the whole of humanity. And they can raise awareness. They're people that I don't think you can ignore them completely if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. And somebody such as Jimmy Carter, and Mary Robinson, and Desmond Tutu turn up. I don't suppose they're going to be that easy to ignore, and potentially it could be embarrassing for somebody who's trying to do something they shouldn't be doing if people like Jimmy Carter appear and ask them what they're doing, and I think they're not necessarily trying to create friction. I think quite the opposite, but I think they will be quite blunt, and they can do that because they don't have to win an election. They are retired. They don't have to impress anyone. So it gives them a bit of a free hand to act.
Well, I have to respectfully disagree, as I think that people actually derive pleasure from flipping off a figure of authority who's no longer has any real power and demonstrating their defiance, and I'm going to do this anyway, and I don't care what Jimmy Carter or Desmond Tutu thinks about it.
Well, I would think that they would not so much go in and to say Russia and say, Putin, here's what you have to do. They would say, hey, let's talk. Can we talk? Can we open up a conversation about, how we can get everybody gets what they want without a lot of shooting, and I think that's very valuable. I mean, I don't think we're a planet that can tolerate a lot more shooting. So we have, war is something that is a huge problem if it's in our future. It was a big problem in our past, but it's even worse in the future. And you have somebody like Putin who's going to be tempted to use force. How can you make him climb down from whatever ladder he's on, right, where he can't back down? Well, maybe if the U.S. Secretary of State goes over there, who's seen as an adversary, can't really get much, can maybe even encourage Putin to do more. But if Desmond Tutu goes in there, is not anybody's adversary, that's different, right? And he's not going to be telling, he's not going to go in front of the cameras and say, I think your president needs to change his behavior. He's going to have a quiet conversation with the president himself. And that could be very valuable. I think, they're not going to force anybody to do anything. But, what's the alternative to shooting? We have to talk, right?
It would be great if people would talk.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen very often.
Well, that's why you'd like to have a trusted body that has no national agenda, has no political ambition. and you just want to prevent people from killing each other. I think that's very valuable. So I can see the point.
Well, I can see the point too. It just doesn't strike me as terribly effective, and the historical parallels of people attempting to intercede isn't real encouraging. I mean, certainly it's encouraging that we haven't made ourselves extinct, and that our wars could have been much worse, and we've had nuclear weapons now for about 70 years, and we haven't used them on a very large scale yet, and that's great. Those are all things to humanity's credit. But there are a lot of other cases, a lot of other things that are not so much to our credit. And when people try to intercede, even in a completely selfless way, it's not often very effective. One of the examples I have in mind is Gandhi specifically said that one of the reasons that nonviolence worked in India is because the British basically took them seriously, and they had a sense of humanity. If you had used Gandhi-style non-violent civil disobedience among the Nazis, they just would have killed everybody. There's some groups that you can reach with that kind of high-minded approach, and there's some groups that are completely beyond it. I strongly suspect that ISIS is completely beyond any kind of rationed discourse. So certainly it's a large enough movement now that there would be people on the fringes that you could reach and reform and persuade, but the core the people who are the spearhead behind this, they are hard cases like old Nazis or old communists, and they are not going to be persuaded because they really believe they're doing a good thing for people by promoting a particular ideological agenda that they think is in the human interest.
Well, that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think you're sending Desmond Tutu to ISIS is likely to change their minds about anything. Probably end up killing him.
No. But yeah,
And videotaping it and showing it on the internet.
Well,
sorry, say that again, would you?
Say which?
Me?
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
I said they would end up videotaping it and showing it on the internet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're kind of like the ultimate trolls, right? I mean, they seem to get their biggest kick out of shocking the West and shocking.
I mean, it certainly. I don't think the elders, as an organisation, would have any illusions about how effective they could be in a particular situation. But that still, it would still be worthwhile to engage in something where they can or could make a difference. And even if that's a small difference, even if that is simply raising awareness of an issue which has been neglected away, could take ocean acidification. That's maybe something that, or clearly something which does need to be raised. So I don't think they would need to have an input into every aspect or even the most difficult aspects, but I somehow don't think they would shy away from trying to do something with even the most intractable problems. If there was any possibility of moving it forward at all, I think they would engage with that. I'm speaking not as somebody who is incredibly familiar with their work. As I say, I've browsed the website and I've followed the G+ page, and I've watched a few news articles. So.
Well,
same as everyone else.
I'm getting educated here as we speak. So, I'm sort of thinking out loud about how they could be effective. But I've always felt that you need somewhere. In many situations, you need a trusted third party, and they could serve as that. For example, for overseeing elections or human rights monitoring, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think you need the right people for particular jobs, don't you? You need people that have got the right experience and have the right sort of cultural backgrounds as well, that various players in whatever area are going to feel comfortable dealing with. and have that, as you say, have that degree of trust.
This sounds a lot like the Bilderberg group, and because the real Bilderberg group, they're trying to look at social economic problems between North America and Europe. I mean, it was originally formed because of this rift that was building between the United States and Europe. So to bring both sides together, get them on a table, and having them talk. Of course, these are unfortunately, you have business. The top in business, politics, all this. All these top people getting together. Of course, they do everything anonymously. They'll present papers, and I've seen one paper about the population issues about third world exploding, and that could present economic problems for the West. And I guess it always seems like when you do something secretly, like with a Bilderberg or even this group, if they're doing stuff, if they're having closed meetings and stuff like that, people are paranoid, and they'll think there's some type of conspiracy. Jimmy Carter has been a Bilderberg, so there's a very good chance, at least here in the United States, we're anything that goes after our sovereignty. If it helps out a third world country, no, it has to help us. That's.
So the U.S. is not the only country that is jealous of its sovereignty, as we are seeing with the potential collapse of the euro in Western Europe right now.
Right.
If the countries had been willing to give up a little bit of economic sovereignty and not just unify their money, but also their banking system, they could have made it work. But people ultimately weren't willing to do that. And Britain, of course, wasn't even willing to give up the pound, and probably glad for it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been talk of what they call a Brexit, which is the British exit. I don't know if I'm sure Adam and Chris have been hearing more about that than I have, but
not a whole lot, to be honest. No, I've not heard much about the Brexit. Heard plenty about Grexit, not much about Brexit.
The British exit from the European community. They've been talking about it ever since we joined the European community. It won't happen. It would be disastrous for the British economy, and everyone knows that. So, it's just not going to happen.
No.
Simple as that.
No one's really around here, around me anyway, discussing that. It's all about the situation in Greece, really.
Yeah.
But if the situation in Greece goes from bad to worse, it will be very difficult to maintain the euro in the way in which it is proposed. That doesn't mean it was going to disappear, but it's going to be a different ball game if and when Greece completely drops out and gives up the euro, which we don't know yet. They may find a way to retain the euro. That there's a lot of pressure to do that. So it remains to be seen, but it's not certain one way or the other, and we shouldn't pretend that it's inevitable either that Britain will stay in the euro or that it will leave the euro. But there will certainly be a permanent constituency on both sides of that issue, as in all contentious issues in the world today. There's a permanent constituency on one side and the other, and they will continue to use their talking points in any venue they're given the opportunity for.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, gentlemen, we've been going for about an hour. So I think we might wrap it up here. I should point out, if you've been trying to follow who we have, it's grown from just me to 5 people. We have Adam Synergy, aka Adam Smith. We have Chris McGinlay. We have Mike Bohler and Nick Nielsen, who came in at a last-minute notice. And I'm glad you guys could make it. So I'd just like to let each of you sort of have a last word. Doesn't have to be much, but just sum up your thoughts for today. We'll start with Adam.
It's been a real pleasure. I'm glad I finally made it to join you guys. It's something I've been meaning to do for a few months, but unfortunately I have had a terrible year. 2015 has been awful. I've not been well. I've had friends and family die. My dog that I had for 16 years died 3 weeks ago. It's been absolutely awful.
Well, I'm glad you could finally make it, Adam, and I hope you'll come back sometime.
You've just got to get on with life, haven't you? You know.
Yeah.
I'm pleased I could make it. It's been fun.
Well, thanks for showing up, Chris.
I've enjoyed speaking about the elders, and interesting to hear different points of view on what can work and what might not work, and what situations are more or less tractable than other ones. These are things that I do think about. And Adam, you mentioned the possible existential threats, extinction threats, and so on. That's something I think about a lot. Not that you can do much about it, one feels, but it's just interesting, almost from a sort of detached scientific point of view, and slightly scary. And you wonder, well, how quickly is this? What sort of time horizon are we talking about? So it's great to be able to mull these things over with a few like-minded individuals.
Yeah, Chris, we should probably go into that topic more in a future episode. So I'll keep it in mind. Mike Bohler.
Well, again, thank you for allowing me on. Sorry about the little mix-up. I'm kind of in the middle of tinkering. It's my day off. I'm working with my Raspberry Pis. I'm trying to reconstitute my old bulletin board back in the old DOS days. So I'm kind of working on that. But anyhow, yeah. I actually don't have anything else. I mean, I wasn't even planning on being on. I was going to watch this and listen to the gang. So keep looking to the stars, I guess.
Thanks, Mike. Nick.
Thanks again for another opportunity to participate. When I joined the conversation, I did not realize that we were already recording, so I spoke even more off the cuff than I usually do. And I hope I haven't offended anyone, but we let the chips fall where they may, don't we?
Yes, we do. And I don't think you offended anybody. At least not anybody who didn't deserve to be. Well, thanks, guys. Now, a couple of things that I'd like to note. As I noted earlier, Brian Koberlein will be our guest on episode 16, which is 3 weeks from today. So if you have questions for Brian, who's an astrophysicist, there's been a lot of interesting developments in astrophysics lately, so get them into me. unseenpodcast@gmail.com is one good place to send your comments. You can also go to our subreddit. There's a link to that in the show notes and in the blog at unseenpodcast.com. We're also, I think, pretty well agreed we're going to do another. The Unseen Podcast has not done a Douglas Adams episode yet. We did one on the WoW Signal about a year ago for Towel Day. This probably won't be a Towel Day episode since that's in May, but we'll have a sort of a... When I realized we talked for over an hour last time and barely scratched the surface of all the interesting ideas in Adams. So we'll do it again, and I may see if I can get Nicholas Joel to join us. So that may be on September 7th, because I can make that a more Euro-friendly time for Nicholas. And also, if you want to join the panel pool, the Unseen Podcast, just send me an email, unseenpodcast@gmail.com. I'll tell you how to get signed up. Or come on over to the Google Plus community for the Unseen Podcast participants and just knock on the door. We'll let you in. Adam is now our 14th unique panelist, and we hope to get, the goal is to get to 30 by 6 months of episode 26 or so. So thanks, guys. As I noted earlier, this is episode 13. It's the 3rd of July, 2015. This is the Unseen Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Oh.